consumption scenarios have dramatically evolved since the appearance of that device. Everybody has a screen. Every individual can watch anything they want, whenever they want. I know you know that, but it's a big struggle in the media world. I mean, I used to be a TV journalist, radio TV journalist for 20 years. I know how they think. And even though they started to do specialized content for social media and online, their own platforms, Netflix-like platforms, or even Snapchat-like platforms, even though they did that, they still struggle into the actual targeting and some new work that needs to be done, which is closer to marketing than storytelling. And that's painful for media organizations to listen to, because they don't want to be any marketing officers. It's a little less stressful for communications people usually to hear. So what do I mean by that? If you look at the key characteristics of one of these videos, for instance, again, please don't be cross at me, trying to improve the way, and there are ways, I'm going to tell you later, how to improve the promotion and dissemination of that video. When you look at the length of it, would any of you watch a 13, 14 minutes video on a bus on your smartphone? Most likely not. Where are the times in the day where you can watch lengthier content? That would be, you know, in the evening, and the screen to do that would rather be a tablet or a television set rather than the phone. So these specific videos, they require commitment from the viewer. You have to convince people to say, hey, you're going to spend 13 minutes with us. It doesn't feel long when you say it like that, especially when we've been spending the morning in a Zoom call. But just put yourself into your daily routine. I mean, you just dropped off the kids at school, or you just went to university, and you go along with your life. You have a break. Maybe during the lunch break, it's COVID time. You can't really share the lunch with other people. You watch some videos on social media. What do you do when you watch videos? Usually what we do is we look at the progression bar at the bottom of the screen to see, is it long or not? Am I going to give the chance to that video? Am I going to give half of my lunch break to that video? So the length is quite important if we're talking about dissemination on social media. That requires a commitment from the viewer. And you can achieve that if you have really good promotion, you have a really good thumbnail on YouTube, and you can sort of, promise really quality content to the viewer, then it can work. As I said, I don't think it's suitable for mobile consumption, not in that form. I can see many ways in which that same content can be repurposed in mobile-friendly formats. And it mimics a TV program. And that's the biggest issue I have, not only with what we've just seen, but many, many clients I work with. We want to have a jewel. We want to have a really nice piece of video to show essentially internal people or stakeholders to, show that we do good stuff. But that reference point that I talked about is good old television. And the distribution model has changed. And what I'm going to say applies to video, it applies to press releases, it applies to written content, to audio content also to a certain level, with the radio ratings being eaten up by podcasts, for instance, and also some European programs starting to make podcasts following that trend. So I'm going to spend some time trying to display before you how the model has changed. And even though I'm going to take television as an example, I mean, that can apply to print, can apply to traditional media, because when in the first part, we talked about ways to seduce journalists, basically. The eventual goal is to reach the people behind the media. Media is just a screen to pass to get to the people. With social media, you don't need the media. You can get directly to the people, but you also have to seduce them. So maybe some of the techniques that we heard this morning can be applied to specific target groups on social media to get the attention of actual people. So why did the distribution model change? We had a central point of broadcasting diffusion. I mean, if it's printing press, newspaper, kiosks, television antennas, and everybody here sees the same thing at the same time. And it's been like that for many, many decades, depending where you live, up to 80 years. And that technology of single point broadcast or diffusion completely altered and factored and crafted the way we tell stories for these old medias. Even though there are many differences in the people you see behind me, you have young people, old people, gay people, straight people, people interested into fishing and cars, others in knitting and social science and politics. We always had very different people among the population, but the technology only allowed us to send a message as one. We have 24 hours in a day. We have so many hours of program, or so many lines of newspapers, so many pages to fill, and that's our medium. So we have to make the best use of that space to communicate the ideas we want to talk about. And that is not the case anymore. I live in Finland. In Finland, linear television, just sitting in the coach and watching stuff with your zapper in hand, almost doesn't exist anymore. It's not the case in Portugal, Spain, or Slovenia yet, but it's going to come, starting to occur in France, starting to occur in Germany, in Czech Republic, in Poland, where people like TVP, whom I work with, are reconsidering things because they see the ratings drop. And when I'm taking that example, of course, the media landscape is my field of expertise, but I see many, many parallels with communications in projects, and that's becoming more and more of what I'm doing. If you fast forward in 2021, basically we have the same central point of transmission, or the printing press, the magazines, the websites even, that we heard about this morning, but we have some newcomers on the side. We have these social medias that request time. So let's talk about the distribution model. That is one message for everybody to please the biggest number, because that's our mission. Here, we should have a different approach. And in the history of communications and the media evolving and adapting to these new techniques, we made big mistakes. The first one was to consider that these audiences were separate, that you had an audience for television, like the one you see behind me, or any traditional media or communications, an audience for the Netflixes and the HBOs and Disney Pluses of the world, another one for Facebook, another one for Insta, etc., etc. That's not really true, is it? But the reason why people thought like that was because technology was attached to the way the audience consumed the content. So we thought that the audience was, in a way, attached to the tech. If you go back in the 80s, the only way for you at home to watch video was a television set. So if you had 3 hours of screen time a day, it's all going to be 100% for the television people. Great for them. Kings of the world for decade. And Daniela and I were part of, half dwarf princes into that world, but that's basically what was the world. And in a setting like that, in a generalist setting, it's fine to do like lengthy generalist videos because, frankly, there's nothing else to see. That's not the case anymore, because what you can see above me or in the side here are representations of what's available on the market and the way it affects screen time and consumption for different people. So let's take Jack. Jack lives in Germany. He likes football, he's interested into the news, he's interested into cross-border projects. He's going to spend half of his screen time on Facebook and half on television. That's already a 50% drop for the traditional ways of communicating ideas. If you look at another neighbor in another country, another user in another country, she's using most platforms, and traditional content, magazines, print, television has a sliver of her time, reading time, screen time. If you look at the teenager in the household, it's going to be essentially Insta. Not really Facebook, because you sort of kind of have to have an account, but it's still for all people now. So, you know, it's Insta or TikTok, even should be TikTok, for really young teenagers. So that also affects your opportunities to reach people. The traditional media are still very important. They are still mass media, and I agree 100% with what Martin said. We need stories, we need content, and these stories have to nourish themselves from the projects and from the human interest and what it does for the people. And that's going to grasp the interest of the journalists. What you shouldn't forget is that you can be as powerful or more than media organizations if you play your social media strategy well. You can do better. You can avoid having to seduce journalists and call them, oh, well, it was a nice article, but I would have hoped that you put EU funding in the title. We have to negotiate with journalists. We have a third party. We're going to have another set of third parties in the social media world, and that's going to be the social media algorithms and their interests themselves. But there are a few tips and tricks to navigate that. So, distribution. Traditional media landscape, you have one message, so that's on the top left of the screen, and you tailor it for most people to understand and enjoy it, and it's consumed. And once it's consumed, it sort of lives in a silo. I never met anyone in my life at the morning coffee at work spitting out word for word the newscast or the article that she read the previous evening. It's not very shareable, is it? So we have that top-down way of communicating that needs to be different for social media. When you look at that new landscape, and keeping in mind the fact that people pick and choose what they want, they are not obliged to watch what you feed them anymore. So when you post something on Facebook, because as we're going to see, it's like the most powerful way to reach people in Europe. It's the most used social media platform in Europe today. Facebook could disappear, and we'll see what comes next. So one of the mistakes is also to put all your eggs into that Facebook basket. But let's take Facebook as an example. You post something on your page. There's only one people that's going to see it at first. It's not everybody at the same time. Worse, Facebook is going to choose and to decide, is that person, given the information I have about her, in the mood to receive a piece of content from that page? So it's not because you follow a page that you automatically receive all publications from that page. That's not true. Everybody gets a different Instagram, everybody gets a different Facebook, everybody gets a different YouTube, and they are curated to you in second place, but in first place, they are curated to the ad revenue strategy of Facebook. How much ad money am I going to funnel through that person today, given the information I know? So we have to trick that, and we're going to talk about it. So distribution, what can that person do? I mean, she has tremendous power because she can start a cascade of media consumption or drop it. Not alone. I mean, even though there's only one person receiving the first or being exposed to that post, we are just a few nanoseconds away from other people being exposed to the same content, and that same behavior will repeat. But when you are a content producer, when you write a press release, you master every line of that press release. You go through Martin's team, they curate it nicely, it's a jewel. You know exactly what you put into that. When you are doing a post, you know what you put in the post, but you don't know how people are going to react to it, because that's the power they have now. They can express interest, depending on the platform, can be likes, can be hearts, can be all this. It's basically all the same thing. And then they can do the most powerful things of all, which is share content. And that affects the way you should think about your content, because the people you need to seduce in that context is not anymore the program director or the journalist that will be a relay for your content. The people you have to seduce are the users themselves, and everybody is different. Everybody has a different set of interests. So in turn, these two friends of him can continue, have the ball continue rolling. Maybe maybe it's an exceptional piece of content, but only half of them share. And by saying half, I mean, that's extremely simplified, and that doesn't reflect the reality. Shares, I mean, if you have like 5% of shares, that's huge. That's really, really good on Facebook. That being said, when you multiply the number of users by the number of outlets, possible outlets, and I know there's a lot missing. There's no YouTube, there's no TikTok, there's no personal messaging apps like Telegram or WhatsApp. But when you multiply the number of content providers by the number of platforms, by the number of users, you end up in a mess of notifications and shares and stuff. And that is usually where you find yourself when you try to define your social media strategy. Where do we go from that? The model is broken. We had a very simple top-down model. We know, we tell you. And we move to that complicated, everybody gets to say their word model, where your content can, have a little number of views and engagement for the first 3 weeks, and then all of a sudden, without any notice, it just goes viral. And you probably have seen on your Instagram or Facebook all videos coming back into fashion, videos that were made like 5, 7, 8 years ago, that all of a sudden went from 5 million views to 25 million views. What happened there is that they met a distributor audience. And that is a key fact that I want you to understand, that I suggest to you. Again, like Martin, I'm not telling you the truth. There is no absolute truth. The other thing I strongly agree with, it's perfectly fine to make mistakes and to fail. That's how you learn. Everybody says that depending on the cultures, it's much harder to have a Frenchman accept a failure than a Finn, for instance. It's much harder to have a Croat accept a failure than maybe someone from Estonia. So there are some cultural factors baked into that, but it's perfectly fine. There's no other way. You will fail in your social media strategy. But if you don't put all your eggs in the same basket, it's okay if there's one or two that break on the way. So what do I mean by distributed audience? Let's have a look at that. When you publish a piece of content on a social media platform, you have that first circle of people that are exposed to your content. And if you manage to establish an emotional connection with them, if you can grab their attention, if you can convince them to watch your content and recognize themselves into that, then they will share it to a larger group, because they have Friends and family, they have people living around them. And if you're really lucky, you can go viral. There is no recipe to be viral. If there was one, and if I knew it, I wouldn't be here telling you anything. I would enjoy probably my ski resort in the French Alps or something. But the way to improve your chances to get to people is to multiply your attempts, to think smaller in terms of production value, in terms of length, and to try to identify these people. Distributed audiences are small and well-connected target groups interested into one topic. One person can belong to different distributed audiences. Maybe I like fishing. Maybe I like cars. Maybe I like football. That's very male, stereotypical here. But you can be part, you have many interests in your life, but you will have different communities with which you can express your interest into these topics. So I'm not talking about influencers. Influencers are one step ahead of that, or bigger than that, because influencers, they make that their work. They are trying to make a living out of that, talking with brands and taking sponsorships and all of that, because they have a community, and the community is essentially interested into their persona, not really about what they talk about, even though it is an ingredient. It's not only that. So the blogger we had earlier, he has people who follow him, who like him, and who might be interested into what he has to say. If you put him out of context, maybe that link will break for that specific context, and it might not work. But we have a live experiment to see. So distributed audiences are just regular people that have slightly more than average activity on social media. And oftentimes you would find them into professional groups. One such example would be nurses, for instance. If you have nurses among your friends, you probably have noticed that they have other nurse friends and that they talk about work things and the gory things that they can talk about in these groups. If you have a project that touches the health questions in that program, if you try to push, to seed your content to these people, chances are they get interested into that and they will spread it. They will be your amplifier, and you will reach the people that will be the most interested into the topic, but also the families and friends who know that person. Activists are another great group. Cyclists. If you have a cross-border cycling program, building better lanes across border, rendering intermodal transport more easy for people actually using the bikes will be really interested into that. And if you seed the video to them, and I'm going to define what that means, then you will be able to have better roles, better numbers. So other examples could be gamers, young parents. That's a very common one, especially parents of a first child, the panicky type. I was one a long time ago, so we used to ask our mothers or grandmothers for parenting advice. No, we just rush on social media and parenting forums to see was that burp okay, and you have that sense of community that is built there. And again, if you have a program promoting work-life balance for young adults, then if you seed your content, you look for these parenting groups on internet forums, on Facebook groups, and other places online, and you just push the link saying, hey, we did a video about that, care to comment? And then people will watch it, probably because it's close to their interests, and maybe they'll spread it. And it goes fast if a video meets their audience. Just to give you a quick example, and I'm conscious of time. I worked for a television station in a remote French territory called New Caledonia, and they had put a very interesting television report about traditional fishing. And on social media, it did really poorly. It had like at best, I think something like 50 views or something like that, when the average was 10, 15,000. We re-edited that video to make it, accordingly to the best practices in social video making. And I'm going to go through that too, don't worry. And it did 500,000 views in a week, because we gave the video, which was the same rough content, more chances to be watched, because we repackaged it. We thought about the target audience and the distributor audience, which are two separate things. The distributor audience is a subset of your target audience. And it worked. It doesn't always work, but when it fails, then you learn something. So let's go back to our program, to your program. How can we promote such a massive effort, such a complicated effort before the eyes of Europeans? I can't agree more with what was said. I mean, when you look at the EU program, and I've been working with the EU long enough to know that communication is a major issue, what we see is a black box. We put a sticker on it, we call it program, some complicated acronym, and we hope for the best. And then we get, the results we all know about. What matters is the people behind the many projects that make for the program. That was already said by others this morning. I'm just trying to hammer that down. The stories live within your projects. What are the tangible, visible benefits for people? People are, strange things. They tend to like to see what other people are doing and to try to assess if that other thing is going to be beneficial for them too. We are social animals. So if we see an interesting behavior somewhere, maybe we give it a go. Maybe we try that out. So the stories live in your project, and that should be what you should be making your videos about. You can do cheaper, more focused videos designed around a common theme. And when I say common theme, that can be a graphics charter, it can be a slogan that belongs to the program. I heard like mini brands or sub brands earlier. Your project is your sub brand. Your project can express itself in many sub brands if you want, but there needs to be a common thread in between them, which is the program through which all of that is possible. And that is what should be at some point in the product. The product could be an Instagram story, can be a TikTok video, could be a YouTube video, could be anything, a Facebook video, Insta, in the feed. But it should start with a story, a practical, tangible, emotional thing. When I say emotional, I'm not trying to have people weep before their phones. Emotions can be expressed in many, many different ways. It can be interest is an emotion, being interested, being captivated by someone, being crossed by something, being upset by something is also quite powerful. And you can use something starting by the problem the project is starting to solve, because if we're working on something, there's a problem at start, some unfairness. So the question that again, we have to ask ourselves more specifically, I know that's like 101, but it's really important. Who are the videos for? And when you answer that question, you can't really say the general population anymore, because that doesn't really exist. You have people expressing interest into many different topics, and you can have many different target audiences. that you can try to reach with different projects under the same banner of the program. So the starting point is to do research. And that comes back to what I said at the very beginning of my presentation, which is research, preparation before you even contact any external service provider. There are some sources for you to assess which platform could be the best to reach the specific group of people that you want to reach on a specific market. If you look at the things from a very large lens at the scale of the continent, and this, by the way, I wrote up a PDF document that is summing up all that I am saying, and you will get links to anything I show into that presentation for later reference. But when you look at that, we can see that Facebook is like by much the largest, with the most used social media platform on the continent. It's not in Russia, interestingly. It's not in Belarus. And there's nuance into that, because we're just looking at everybody in the countries. What do you use as social media platform? We need to get narrower than that. So here's for more specific figures. Facebook is like way, way ahead. YouTube is 2.4% of social media usage, according to StatCounter. So let's say I want to, because it's actually an interesting case study. Let's say we want to have a look at the specific stats in Belarus. Which would be the best platform for me to post something if I'm to do a video? Let's not even narrow down the video, just do a video. What's the best platform? So if you look at the stats, I know it's small, it's going to get bigger. Pinterest is like way, way, way above the others. And then if you look at YouTube, it's under 13% of people are actively using YouTube. And I think in these stats, it's like more than once a month. So you can already see that YouTube might not be the best platform. You are cutting the pie of the awareness you can get by selecting that platform. So maybe use other platforms. Let's have a look at Poland. In Poland, it's Facebook overwhelmingly, that's a very difficult word for French people to say. Overwhelmingly, almost, you got me. When you look at YouTube, it's 3% are using YouTube on a regular basis. And we instantly saw, when Agnieszka shared the figures earlier, and again, that is a very common process. Your video is really great. I'm just pointing out ways to make it better and to best promote it. So thinking about the publication platform and where it's going to meet people is quite important. So 3%. I think we can maybe take questions from that point before I delve into the second part of the presentation, unless you want me to jump right in.
Hello, there are no questions, but rather comments from Martin. He's saying that it's very challenging to be on social media since competition is very high. People are able, even professionally, to deliver inspiring contents. We have a lot to learn as EU-funded programs to adapt ourselves to this completely new setting. And he couldn't agree more. With us being social animals, we like to see other people. So these were some of the comments throughout your presentation.
Thank you very much. It's a tough world, and competition is very difficult because attention has proven to be very valuable. People make money with attention all the time, and it's a scarce resource. It's like oil. There is a finite quantity, and we are not going to discover more attention among people. So raising awareness on these fantastic projects. I have to say, these projects are really interesting. I was born and raised on a border. I'm from Eastern France, which has borders with Germany and Switzerland. I spent a third of my life in Germany, a third of my life in Switzerland and France, and now I live in Finland. So that's, you know, striking a chord with me. These projects deserve to be well known. So I'd like to reflect on some tips to tell stories. So, what is your message? Is the key thing. What is the story you want to tell? It seems very basic, but I get back to it all the time because it's easy to lose focus on the message. Who is it for? And depending on these two key factors, that's when you're going to choose the type of video you're going to be doing, the length of video that you're going to be doing, even maybe the contractor, because you want to use someone that is more agile doing Instagram stories because you've assessed that the population of nurses you want to reach as a distributed audience lives in your target country more likely on Instagram stories. And there's a bit of research to be done also personally, asking around when you meet people on the field, how do you consume content? Where are you? Are you in WhatsApp groups? Can you share some accounts you follow that might be of interest to us? And you can build a collection of those and try to use them as distributed audiences later on. So the ways to think about these two questions is, okay, do I want to promote the building of new cycling lanes that go cross-border and the benefits for the population? Well, there are two issues in there. There's the building of the cycling lanes. So, you know, the first ones that are going to use that. And there's all the people that did not really consider taking the bike for a cross-border travel and who, thanks to the project, the outcome of the project might want to. So you have two different messages for two different subsets of the audience, and that should be two different videos. What I'm going to tell now might sound a bit strange, but visual storytelling is not new. What is new is the way it occurs, and we're going to delve into tips and tricks now. So maybe you remember or recognize the Lascaux paintings in southwestern France, which are one of the oldest visual storytelling examples of humanity we know of. When you look at that, we don't just have paintings. What we have is a storyline. We have a hunting scene that is built on these, or painted rather, on these walls. So it has a narration, it has a dramatic progression. And that dramatic progression, believe it or not, has been refined for centuries and millenaries. Think about when you were a kid. Maybe there was one story in particular that you really, really liked, and you ask your parents to read it to you again and again and again. The question is, why is that? Because something happens in between you and the story that is being told. Because you can maybe identify yourself to one of the characters, because the situation that is there. There's a lot of children's books about how to go to bed, and other characters, small crocodiles going to bed because parents are desperate to put their kids to bed. So there's a lot of books like that. When you do that, when you read a story, when you read a good book, you have to feel something about the story. And again, agreed, unless you're an accountant, it's hard to identify yourself with a financial report. It's not really, a good piece of storytelling. So maybe if I show you that brings back memories. Maybe not. It's always hard when we have so many countries in the room. But Goldilocks and the Three Bears, maybe you remember the story. When is the last time you read that story? Was it 15, 20, 40 years ago? But you still have the story in your mind. Why? Because it struck a chord, because you felt something. We grow up with stories. They are the tool we use as human beings to project ourselves into a reality that is not ours. That is what they find. It's a key different point between the animals and you. We can imagine stuff and we can imagine being into something else. That's project management. We are thinking ahead of the possible outcomes of a project. That's a story. So here's for the shortest story I know of, and you're going to see the relevance of that in a minute. For sale, baby shoes, never worn. Just 6 words. And these 6 words convey a story. You can start to feel something. What happened? Did the baby die? I mean, what happened? When you lay it down, there's a beginning, there's a middle, and an end. That's the same structure than the Lascaux paintings. When you write a book or an article, you do the same thing. Remember when Martin told you that the first paragraph is key? Title and first paragraph, of course it is. Beginning, middle, and end. Sounds silly to just lay it down like that. Let's switch over the words. We have a situation, a tension, and an unfolding, a dénouement, as sometimes the English like to use the French word. And when you do a longer story, typically your Netflix show, you would have mini tensions and mini unfolding, etc., etc. And that goes into a last big unfolding. So let's look at a way to plan your story. When you are writing a video, when your objective is to convey a message, the traditional way of doing that is to start, in terms of attention, quite low. And then you build up tension. And then, we cannot keep our attention so high for so long, so it drops a bit. And then you need something else. You need an event to increase attention again. And that's really basic storytelling, as human beings have been using it for millenaries. The problem is social media changed that. Now you have to start really high, because competition is amazingly horrendous. It's not like, a few other institutions beside you. It's many, many people. And then there can be a drop in attention. You need another spike. There can be another drop, and there can be another spike. So these are the traditional storylines. They need to be changed. Let me introduce you to Boris. Boris is a bodyguard that you have hired in your brain. Boris is acting as a filter in between your brain and all the stories and the people that want to reach to you. Here's Boris. Okay, he's the bouncer of the nightclub. The nightclub being your head, which is fine. Some stories will go through the filter. These two, science, geopolitics, yeah, great. All others are just going to vanish into the Facebook timeline. You need to have an emotional connection if you want people to watch it. If you look at the views, and the reason why I said that the views are not necessarily a key metric, what Facebook is showing you is like 3 seconds views. That's the number you see on your Facebook page. When you see the number of views, is the amount of people that stayed for 3 seconds and not the others. When you go dig into the stats and see a bit further who actually watched the video until the end, it's a very small percentage of that. That's incentivized for Facebook because they want to sell ads to people. Oh, look how many views you did. That's a trick they've been using for 10 years. And as people started to be a bit grumpy about that, they shifted the focus to 10-second views, but it's basically the same thing. So I'd like to Okay, that's an interesting question, and it's close to what I was about to say. So Daniela is asking, how do you make a video with a single story when it's dealing with tens of different projects? You do tens of videos. You do smaller, less ambitious in terms of production value than what we saw, but you do more of them with the same amount of money, reaching more people, and you brand your program into each and every of these videos. You have story. Yeah, absolutely. One story per project, many stories per project. In fact, that can happen. I mean, that is something I saw in the Met Talks YouTube channel, which was one attempt to have a series called #Met Talks, where we had a series of interviews. These are based on roughly the same idea. Rather than having like a documentarist come and make a posh and expensive video, they decided to shoot smartphone videos for key points. There are ways these videos can be improved, but the basic idea to give you more chances to reach people with more items, that gives you more presence on social media because you're posting more often, which is also something that was done in Belarus and Poland. I mean, it's a good thing that you have these 6 videos in many languages. That gives you publishing opportunities. So, and yeah, you just answered to your question. And releasing through different channels according to the regions. Yes, in some regions, Twitter is going to be more efficient to reach your target audience than YouTube, for instance. So you should design a video that it works on Twitter. That means it's going to be shorter, and it wouldn't work on YouTube at all. And just to reflect on the question of the quality is important. It depends on the channels. On YouTube now, quality is super important. You need to have really good content, technically, and also, content-wise, for it to work. On TikTok, less so. As Instagram stories, and we're going to come to the example section, I have to move on. In Instagram, maybe you don't need to have like super drone footage and pimped up presenters. There was a funny choice of words, sorry about that. So let's delve through a case study. I'm going to use someone from the media industry because what they did is remarkable. Funk is a German media outlet that is actually financed by the public service media in Germany. And their goal was to find a way to deal with that mess. And what they did, and that was the original plan, rather than creating a new television channel for young people under 30, which was roughly the target group, they created 60 different products. It was a 45 million one-shot effort. It worked so well that the 45 million became the yearly budget for Funk, and it was even increased. Most of these programs you can see, which could be anything, could be like a Snapchat, daily publication, could be posh Facebook videos, could be YouTube video, and anything from the panel. I mean, each of those have different forms, but they all target different subgroups of the larger target audience. And that's where you can see the comparison in between the program, which is the brand, Funk, or Tezim, and the projects. And even at the level of the projects, depending on the size of the project, if you have many different stories to tell to different people, and that could be, a happy aspect of one project or something that didn't work so well, but have the stakeholders learn something, that's ingredients for a new story. And people will like that. Because if you publish more regularly, rather than doing a one-shot, then you can build followers. You can have a follower base. So let's look at some examples of that. Here's a piece of content that's called Hochkant, which means vertical in German. One of the first attempts. And I'm showing that to you because you should compare that to a traditional newscast. That's how differently they talk from what television is usually doing. Replace in your head the word television with press release, or general kind of videos you can see within the union. So what you're going to see is an excerpt of a Snapchat story, because that's from 5 years ago. So you see, we started well before the pandemic, with subtitles on the right side. But let's have a look and comment after that.
Hallo Leute, ihr habt es vielleicht schon mitbekommen, in Manchester hat es einen mutmaßlichen Selbstmordanschlag gegeben. Mehr Infos hat nachher Helene für euch.
Ariana Grande postete nach ihrem Konzert auf Twitter: Ich bin am Boden zerstört. Aus tiefster Seele, es tut mir unfassbar leid. Ich habe keine Worte für das, was passiert ist.
Hey Hochkant! Bisher hat dieser Tweet weit über 500.000 Retweets bekommen und fast 1,5 Millionen Herzen. Die Solidarität ist aber nicht nur auf Twitter groß. Unter dem Hashtag Room for Manchester öffneten die Bewohner Manchesters ihre Wohnungen und sagten: Kommt vorbei, wir helfen euch, wir haben ein offenes Ohr, ihr könnt auch bei uns pennen. Und auch Stars zeigen ihre Solidarität mit den Betroffenen des Anschlags.
Katy Perry sagt zum Beispiel: Mein Herz bricht, wenn ich an die betroffenen Familien denke. Mein Herz bricht, wenn ich an Ariana denke. Mein Herz bricht, wenn ich an diese Welt denke. Und auch Justin Timberlake äußert sich auf Twitter, indem er sagt: Meine Gedanken sind bei allen, die von dieser schrecklichen Tat in Manchester betroffen sind. Wir müssen uns nun lieben.
Was bei dem Konzert in Manchester passiert ist, ist ohne Frage schrecklich. Trotz aller Emotionalität wollen wir aber für euch einen kühlen Kopf bewahren und sagen euch deswegen, was wir sicher wissen. Gestern Abend explodierte kurz nach dem letzten Song.
Okay, so that's enough to spot the main differences between a traditional way of communicating and that. I mean, that was just after the attack in Manchester at that concert. You might remember that. They don't start the story with what happened at the attack. They start the story because they care about the target audience, and they know they are talking to people that are in between 12 and 15 years of age. They talk about the reaction of the stars that these kids care about. So they tailor the message in a way: hey, that is grave, what happened. Let's look at what the people you admire say about it. They say it's grave, and then we move on to the main topic. So it's a drastically different approach than what traditional continuous live TV coverage would be. But these are TV journalists, these two guys you just saw. The quality of it, it's all made with a smartphone. Why? Because it's a Snapchat. It moves, it's a bit fuzzy. They're using the built-in tools for titling, and it worked really well. They could talk about the news and politics to tweens and early age teenagers, because they curated their message. So one story per day, one producers, tens of thousands of followers into that tiny subgroup. And you might say, yeah, but I can't really see ourselves communicating that way. To which I would answer, why? Because you would reach people that you would never reach with the content you do. And the other people outside of that group wouldn't be exposed to that content. So if you are afraid of criticism, just swallow that fright, because you try something and there's a success at the end, probably. So, and that has to do with, traditional communication and the fears we have about what stakeholders are going to say. Be curious, try stuff. Another example, same outlet, different target group, different topic. So that series was made for 30-somethings who started in life, new job, new family. It was on Facebook because that's what the producer identified was the right platform for that target group after research and analysis. And it looks like that.
Entgeltgleichheitsgesetz mit Verbandsklagerecht. Wechselmodell zur Regelung der Betreuung minderjähriger Kinder. Individualbesteuerung statt Ehegattensplitting. Alter, das klingt, als wäre Gleichberechtigung ein Thema so emotional wie die Aufbauanleitung von einem Billigregal. Dabei geht's doch eigentlich wirklich jedem was an. Mich sowieso, weil ich eine Frau bin. Und Männer spätestens dann, wenn sie Väter werden.
es hat sich bei uns recht früh ergeben, dass meine Frau einfach den besseren Job hat und ich deswegen zu Hause bleibe, mich eher um die Kinder kümmere und nur noch halb arbeite.
Dass eine Frau mehr verdient als ein Mann, ist in Deutschland immer noch eine krasse Ausnahme. In der Regel ist es nämlich so. In der gleichen Zeit, in der ein Mann 100 Euro verdient, kriegt eine Frau gerade mal 79 Euro. Die große
Okay, so that's enough to get the idea. So what we have here is something that can look maybe like a good first step for many projects within your program, because we have real-world interviews. We have like real people interviews. We have a presenter that is doing an explainer. We have motion graphics also that can help convey the message, but that is from the get-go targeted at, you know, young people with families, and it's a topic that can be close to what the program also is dealing with: gender inequality and social justice. So we call all of these like containers. The recipe you will use to tell the story, it's a container. And so what I mean is, it's your production sheet. What is the video going to look like? Is it going to be like a witness video? Is it going to be an explainer video? Is it going to be a reporting video? Is it going to be a first person follow me around video? Is it going to be just motion graphics? That all depends on the research you do beforehand. And I can, you know, understand there might be a bit of frustration because, oh, we thought we would hear about nice video tricks and the graphic stuff. That's the same thing as putting paint on an old car. If the old car is bad, then it won't roll. The most important part in the media world is knowing who you talk to and do your research, statistical analysis of the performance of on your page, but also the reality of the markets. So just to give you another example, when we look at Facebook, for instance, I don't know if you're familiar with that. That is what we call a retention curve. So if we consider Facebook as an outlet, because we decided it's the best outlet for us, that is the amount of people that are going to drop as the video is progressing. That is the same retention curve typical for YouTube. So you would, on YouTube, have a thumbnail. So you would have people that deliberately click on something because they were already convinced. So you'd maybe drop a bit because, yeah, that's not really what I expected, but you keep most of the people. And then near the end, when you say stuff like, and don't forget to like this video and subscribe to get the latest notifications, that's when people are dropping. So depending on that, that gives you a recipe to build your story, because you can't just put the same video on Facebook and YouTube and expect to have good results in both cases. When you look at the Facebook video, you have that amount of time to say the most about the project, because that's where you're going to talk to the most people. So if we take a video, say, that reaches 20K views, 20,000 views, the 20K are going to be here. And then we drop to about 10K near the end of the green zone. So that green zone is where your messaging has to occur. You need to grab attention. You need to say it's EU funded thanks to the program, and you need to say a few things about the project itself, and then you can unfold and be more specific. There's still going to be people around in the end, and these 5 to 15% of people that saw the video are going to play an interesting role, because they are the most likely to be engaged with the video. They like it so much that they stayed until the end, and are the most likely to share the video with others, friends and family. Packaging is really important. What we have with our phones is basically an infinite stream of content. We just scroll and scroll and scroll and scroll. So the first thing to do is to package. Here's an example. These are two excerpts of two Facebook videos of exactly the same piece of content. One was done by Zeit Online, a German outlet. The other one was done by Spiegel. You can see main differences already. The Spiegel one is smaller. Why? Because they just took the 16:9 video, they put it into Facebook and hope for the best. The site online, they just went through the effort of making that video square, and you can see it's bigger on the screen. Bigger means that it draws more attention. Another main difference, there's a big title, a meme lead, which is encompassing the contents of the video. New EU-funded cycling lanes in such region. That's your title. And then you have someone, in the video unfolding and someone telling the story. In terms of results, even though Spiegel Online has 1.5 million followers and site has about half of that, the results are quite impressive. Site has 5 times more views than Spiegel, just because they packaged the video differently. And again, it's the same piece of content. So what we have is a thumb stopper. So that is the thumb stopper, something that tells you, sorry, that's the header. The thumb stopper is the fact that they made it square. There's a header, and there's that catchphrase here, okay? So that's an idea of the packaging that you can do for Facebook. What I'm telling you now is like one example application of the tips that communication officers should know when they plan for dissemination. You should know about who is my target audience, who is the distributor audience that is going to help me reach that target audience, where does that distributor audience live on the internet? Is it Pinterest? Is it Facebook? Is it like forums? Is it something else? Is it private WhatsApp groups, something that we see more and more, Telegram channels? And from there, you decide upon, okay, so it's going to be an Insta because these people are on Insta. We need to make a series of Instagram stories on the project. And maybe for good figure, you also do a Facebook one to reach another target group. The source material can be shared across videos. Sometimes it doesn't work because you have vertical content that can't be fit into horizontal content. So I think we still have time for question. I had more stuff to tell you, but I'm just finishing by that, which is the same retention curve on Facebook, because let's face it, you're probably going to be using Facebook a lot. At least for the forthcoming years, it's going to be quite popular. The way you need to structure a video, the narrative you need to use, you need to have something big at the start. You need a thumb stopper. Why do we call it like that? Because if I grab one of the many phones I have laying around, you need to stop that thumb from doing that morning gymnastics that you're doing all the time on social media, Twitter, Facebook, all of these content providers. They rely on a stream of content. You need to stick out. And you can use a few different tricks. You can use big letters, big titles. You can use a powerful piece of imagery. You can use a fantastic drone shot from your shooting. You can use a graphic that was designed by a motion designer. You can use a subtitle, powerful excerpt of an interview that is relevant, something to stop the thumb from sliding on the screen. And that shouldn't be more than 3 seconds in that case. And then you make a promise. What's a promise? It's 10 to 15 seconds to say, if you stick viewing that video, that's what you're going to be learning about. And in the promise, you say, we're going to talk about that. It's EU funded. It belongs to that program. And you hint at what's coming next. And then you can slow down. You can take time to explain your fact number 1, your fact number 2. You can follow a more traditional storyline. But it's not that different from what we know already, which is the way to write articles in newspapers. Headline, then you have a few lines that explain what's happening in the article, then paragraph 1, paragraph 2, in order of relevance and importance. When you are scrolling, reading your newspaper, The headlines are catching your attention. And then, okay, you got my attention. Tell me all about it. Then you read the header. You read the 3-4 lines. Oh, okay, vaccination 45% complete in such country. Okay, let's read the first paragraph. And maybe you have enough information after the first paragraph and you just continue browsing. It's the same typical behavior. The only difference is that it's happening much, much faster on social media, and all these providers around your video are using psychological tricks, using bright colors. I mean, have you noticed how many ads there are on Instagram today as compared to 3 years ago? 3 years ago, we had virtually no ads on Insta. Today, almost 1/4 of the content are ads. And these are the most eager for attention. These are the ones that are going to use these techniques. So what you need to do is watch a whole effing bunch of videos online and watch them from a producer's point of view. Which are the ingredients of that? And in the PDF I'm about to share with you, there are some sources where you can identify what is working on different platforms. And then you can analyze them. Okay, there's a header. There's a shot of a close-up shot on something relevant. There is a presenter. There is no presenter. It's so and so long. And analyze the videos. There is no recipe. I give training to people to teach them how to do that, but I never do it in a general way. I always do it applied to a project, because every story is different. I need context, because the technique is going to change and we're going to try stuff and something is going to fail, but we're going to learn from that and moving on by being rigorous and producing regularly while learning from, the publications and successes and failures. Then we can attain our goal, which is transmitting the ideas to other brains that we want to keep that idea.